Hello and welcome to the program. By the end of this year, Ukraine plans to acquire a special vessel. The Cabinet of Ministers has allocated over $10 million for the purchase of a scientific icebreaker for Ukrainian scientists working in Antarctica. Ukraine has never had a specialized vessel of its own, which could be used to study the world's oceans. Now, that's about to change. To talk more about this, we welcome to our studio today Mariia Pavlovska, a research fellow at the National Antarctic Scientific Center of Ukraine. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming in.
Hello.
So can you tell us a bit more about why it's important to invest in research in the Arctic?
Both poles of the Earth, the North Pole and the South Pole, are like the very, very special places where we can feel and detect the most important climate change that is actually happening on our planet. So if you compare it with something which is more close to our common understanding, it's like, for example, when you're measuring the blood pressure somewhere like on your finger, or you're measuring it directly on your wrist somewhere here. So you can also measure the blood pressure on your leg or on your stomach, but you won't get the proper result. It's the same with the research. If you would like to see how climate change influences the wildlife, the resources that we are using, and if you are doing the research in Ukraine, for example, in the Black Sea, of course you will get some data, but you will not be able to detect the sudden and rapid changes. In order to detect these changes in a proper way, you have to do the measurement on the poles. These are like the hotspots where we see how the climate change influences our well-being, the resources that we need for our existence, and the ecosystems.
Right. An interesting comparison there between how accurate measurements are and how to do them. Now, let's talk a little bit about Antarctica. I believe we have some images of Antarctica because a lot of the time people find it hard to imagine even what it's like. And Antarctica is incredibly beautiful. And I think now on screen we can show you some of the images that we have that were obtained by NASA. This month, the agency is flying over the glaciers and the rivers of ice, and they have these beautiful images of this landscape that's absolutely filled with ice and snow, and it's frozen, and there's really nothing there except that. So the region is obviously very, very beautiful. Tell us about some of the research that the Ukrainian group will do in Antarctica when they travel there.
Actually, we are doing a lot of research already now. There are different groups working in completely different fields, such as geophysics. Some of them are studying the ozone layer. Everybody knows that the ozone layer is very important and it's worth studying. There are also people studying penguins, studying plants, the sea ice cover, the weather conditions there. So we have a lot of people working there in Antarctic already, and they're doing some great job. Some of them are just continuing the work that was set up by the British, when you know that this station belonged to Great Britain before, and there was some research ongoing there, and therefore we have to continue to do it for the British Antarctic Survey and to complement it with our data. And some of the research is completely new. It's something that Ukrainian team has just started. For example, last year I was actually at the station and I participated in the Ukrainian expedition during the Antarctic summer, and we were doing the we were setting up the marine monitoring. We just made the special polygon to study sea around our island, and this is a very interesting thing because it gives us a lot of data that we can use to see how climate change influences the sea, how the resources are developing under the sea ice cover. And it was done for the first time last year when we set this proper polygon to monitor the sea. We are also doing a very interesting research about the plants and their the way they are surviving there in these harsh conditions. And we are specializing on the bacteria that are helping plants to do this. If you study these bacteria that live inside the plants, in the leaves, in the roots, you can understand how they help the plant to thrive in these harsh conditions when it's cold, dark, when it's too much irradiation, because you know that the UV light there is really intense.
So extremely difficult and sort of extreme conditions that this flora and fauna can survive and how they adapt to it. Let's talk a little bit about at least 7 countries have laid claim to Antarctica, as far as we know. And I believe now we have on screen a graphic where we can show the different countries. So there's the Norwegian claim, Australian claim, New Zealand claim, French claim. I mean, there are a number of countries that have interest in that region. Why do you think there's so much interest there? I mean, by the sounds of things, it's a frozen land. Why are countries interested in it?
Well, first of all, it's not just the ice, it's the land that is under the ice. And the land, of course, can harbor some resources. And so far, it is prohibited to exploit any resources from the Antarctic. But it won't be like this for a long time, because soon, I think in 2030, they're going to adopt the new act, and then the prohibition on resource use can be either a bit softened, or maybe they can make some exclusions to it. And then there will be the time when those countries that are doing some research there, that have some land claims, they will be actually in line to use these resources. And the resources can be different. It's not only geological resources, even though there are some there.
That's a very interesting. I was about to ask you actually about sort of this other side that's unexplored, still the land. According to some research rather suggests that there's a lot of oil underneath, and lots of it, apparently. What do you make of that sort of research, and what do you make of those sort of claims that there's a lot of oil in Antarctica?
So far, I'm not familiar with this part, because we are not doing any research in terms of oil there. I heard that there is some, and there should be some. And of course, in terms of technical question, you can get it out of there. It's the law that prohibits to do this. It's not something really...
And the cost, really. And the cost, if you think about the cost of sort of drilling, I think it would be quite expensive.
Yeah, it will be quite expensive, and also you have to transport it. But the main thing is actually the law that prohibits to do anything like this. There are also some other geological resources, some minerals, and also it's really important in terms of bioprospecting, because this land is unique, and there are some biological resources, some maybe genes or something else that can be used in cosmetics, in drugs, in anything you can imagine, but it's still too much regulated. And if you want to be in line to try to investigate this and to use this, you have to be in Antarctic now.
That's a very interesting point, and I think there's a lot of areas that are still unexplored, and it's thanks to research and to scientists who can provide the sort of information and information from the ground, from there, to develop all sorts of industries.
Yeah, for example, now if you go to the doctor and you have some blood test, usually they use a special type of reaction that was actually discovered just in a very weird way. Just a scientist went to Yellowstone Park in the US just because he was curious about the bacteria living in the hot springs, and he was interested like what they're doing there, how do they survive there. And he actually he actually investigated this reaction just by chance. And now this reaction is used in any clinical lab. Anywhere you come to have some blood test, you will be treated, and your blood will be treated with this type of reaction. So this is the same thing. You know, sometimes it looks like something weird that scientists are investigating. You don't see any practical sense in it. But then, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, it can be something like a scientific revolution.
Breakthrough.
Yeah, like a breakthrough that will help the humanity a lot, that will contribute a lot to economic development and so on.
I think that's a really valid point. Also, I find it incredibly interesting that at Ukraine's Vernadsky base, there's a postal service.
Yeah, there is actually a postal service. It's a bit weird because you can buy stamps there. You can buy some envelopes, but of course we can't send the post regularly because most of the time the sea is covered with ice and there is no logistics. So basically how we do this, during the summer, there is some marine traffic coming, like yachts or some tourist ships, and we can give them this post, and then they go to the mainland and they can send the post from there. But it will be with Vernadsky stamp, and it will be sealed and stamped on Vernadsky.
But why on earth would you need to have a postal service literally at the end of the earth?
Just for fun, really.
Right.
This thing is just for fun because we also have to raise the awareness of people around about the research and everything. And this is also part of this awareness raising. You know, when the tourists are coming to our station, we are welcome them. We are telling them about the climate, about the biology and research. And they have some option to send this mail, to do some photos, to like walk with us around the island, around some parts, of course, not around all the island. And this is the type of awareness rising of the general public. So this postal service is just for fun, really.
Right. Do you get a lot of tourists?
Yeah, we have a lot of tourists because actually our station is at very southern point, the most southern point where the vessels can actually come. They are not usually traveling more southern, further to the south, so they actually stop at our station. And a lot of tourists are coming there asking about the research. They are really interested, and several times I think we had more than 100 tourists during the day. It's not always like this, because otherwise we couldn't walk there, but sometimes it happens. And you realize you have to do this because it's also the mission of a scientist. Okay,
last question, my personal question. What sort of temperatures are you working with when you're there on the job at the station? What's the weather like outside? How low does it sort of drop?
I was there in summer, and it was not really cold. It was, I think, the temperature was like we are having now in at the end of autumn in Ukraine.
So
it was
minus like, 7 degrees Celsius?
Yeah, -5, 0. Sometimes when it's sunny, because it's on the pole, you know, when it's sunny, it's really hot there. So you can actually walk out in the t-shirt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but of course during the winter the temperature drops to -25 or -30, but not colder. The main problem there is the wind. It's awfully
the wind chill
windy.
factor.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming into our studio. It's been a very interesting conversation.
You're welcome.
That was Mariia Pavlovska, a research fellow at the National Antarctic Scientific Center of Ukraine. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.